welcome to This Week in Agriculture, a presentation of the Communications Unit, Ministry of Agriculture. On this week's presentation, we take a look at the half-year figures, or figures as at the end of July, as it relates to exports in the second instance. In the first instance, we're going to be focusing on the efforts of our farmers in terms of acreage sown. You may be aware that harvesting has already begun in Blackbush. Some of those farmers who went back rather early in the season and were able to get all their acreages sown, they are now harvesting. However, because of the rainy season and all the challenges faced by our farmers, many were unable to sow until much later in July. And so, therefore, their harvest time will be later in the year. And again, they run the risk of running into another rainy season, and therefore, again, the losses associated with being unable to harvest the paddy, and secondly, to get it out from the land where your cultivation is. But nevertheless, the overall target that was set, there has only been a short coming of about 10% across the board, and even though that figure was scaled back, it looks like the second crop, 2018, will be just under 500,000 tons. As you know, in the first crop this year, farmers were able to realize a harvest of over 500,000 tons of paddy and earnings of just around 17 billion Guyana dollars. So on this week's presentation, we will be bringing you the figures relative to what was sown, what is expected to be harvested, and of course, exports for the first 7 months of this year, and it's looking really great. So we'll be back after these messages. I'm your producer and host, Christopher Holder. Stay tuned. Red rice is similar to cultivated rice. It is often referred to as overhead or overhang and is often taller than the cultivated rice. However, because of its similarity to rice, it is regarded as a problematic weed since its control by chemical means is limited or near impossible. The main source of red rice infestation is rice seeds contaminated with weed seeds. The other source is red rice seeds left in the soil from previous crops. This means that any control measure should be aimed at the reduction of infestation from these sources. Red rice is a heavy seed producer, more than 1,000 seeds per plant. Seeds can remain inactive in the soil until conditions for growth become favorable. It is therefore imperative that farmers allow for a grow-out period every crop before sowing is done. In this regard, farmers should never rush through land preparation on lands that are known to have red rice infestations. Instead, the following steps should be taken. Burn the field after harvest. After the first plow, the field should be irrigated lightly so as to encourage germination and establishment of red rice seeds. The weedy seedlings should then be left to develop to the 2 to 3 leaf stage and then destroyed by plowing. Another flush of weeds would be encouraged, and this should be killed by another round of plowing. This should be done as part of land preparation for at least 2 successive crops to reduce infestation levels. A message from the Rice Research Station, Guyana Rice Development Board, Ministry of Agriculture.
Climate change is now a real issue for Guyana's agricultural landscape. The Hydrometeorological Services Agromet Unit is urging all farmers to be aware of the weather factor and its impacts when planning their agricultural activities. The unit is further urging farmers to make use of the products tailored to their needs that are now available on the Hydromet website at hydromet.gov.gy. Click on the Farmers and Drought Monitoring Bulletins. These products will allow you to access various information such as seasonal outlooks and agricultural advisories. A message from the Hydromet Service, Ministry of Agriculture.
Here's an important notice. Do you know that it is illegal to import, store, distribute, sell, and purchase antibiotics without a license or prescription, as the case may be? According to the Antibiotic Act of 1952, owners of livestock and other animals are not permitted to purchase and use antibiotics unless prescribed by a veterinarian. It should be noted that the misuse of antibiotics could result in the development of resistance to the very antibiotics, which in turn will pose health risk to the animal and to humans. The GLDA advises that farmers should not administer antibiotics to animals unless prescribed by a veterinarian. Non-compliance with this act will result in fines and imprisonment. A message from the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, Ministry of Agriculture.
Do you know that the smoke emitted by mosquito coils contains pesticides? Mosquito coils registered by the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board for sale contain pesticides that have been approved for use in homes in accordance with label directions. These are found in supermarkets, pharmacies, and other pesticides vending sites countrywide. The use of illegal mosquito coils is dangerous to human health, especially children and the elderly. A message from the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board, Ministry of Agriculture.
Coming out of a harvest of some 500,000 tons of paddy for the first crop 2018, Guyana's rice farmers are again set to defy the odds and produce a crop of just under 500,000 tons for the second crop this year, harvesting for which has already begun in Blackbush on the quarantine. Finance Minister Winston Jordan in Parliament recently disclosed to the House that there was a contraction of the rice industry by 3%. But this was expected in the face of the challenges that have been facing farmers due to the weather and its impact on land preparation, harvest, and later on the access dams which farmers use to get in and out of their farms. For the first crop, rain and other factors resulted in some farmers completing their sowing late and so ended up harvesting late and encountering severe setback in terms of earnings. This late harvest, coupled with the early arrival of the May-June rainy season, placed further constraints on the efforts of our farmers, with many being unable to return to the land in time for the second crop. Sowing was therefore spaced out over the entire rainy season and way outside the safe planting period. While farmers have begun the harvest in Blackbush, many have rice that is just 20 days old. According to GRDB's General Manager Nizam Hassan, production figures for the second crop this year is just 10% short of the amount targeted, but that the actual acreage sown is despite the challenges posed by the weather.
Guyana's rice industry has continued to demonstrate its resilience to the challenges that the industry faces and rice production faces. For the second crop of 2018, which is sometimes referred to as the autumn crop, 90% of the targeted production has been achieved, and this is notwithstanding the early arrival of the rain. Early April we got rains which affected somewhat the harvesting for the first crop, and of course it affected the land preparation and production for the second crop. But notwithstanding, we have been able to cultivate 80,000 hectares of the farming lands, and notwithstanding also that the production is a little more spread out, and I say so to the extent that we've recently concluded most of the cultivation, but some farmers have started and harvesting has commenced in Region 6. The industry continues to demonstrate that it is resilient, it is strong.
Focusing on the productive efforts of the various rice-growing regions of Guyana, the GRDB General Manager said in all the regions, productivity was high despite the challenges faced during the crop.
With regards to the specific regions or the individual regions across the rice producing areas, Region 2 cultivated 13,276 hectares, which is about 93% of its original target. Region 3 actually went past its target by 5%, so that region cultivated 8,501 hectares. Region 4, some challenges there again because of the weather situation, and Region 4, is the smallest of all the regions in terms of rice production. Region 4 cultivated 3,476 hectares. With regards to Region 5 and Region 6, both of those regions cultivated, Region 5 cultivated 89% of its targeted production, and Region 6 with 85%. Both of these regions, of course, were affected by the early rains, both in the areas of harvesting from the first crop and also in land preparation for the second crop. What is important also is that those farmers that, well, what we observed, the farmers that harvested late for the first crop, is because they went back into cultivation later than the recommended planting schedule. And this is very important. This is a very important point that the Rice Board has been advising farmers. And even some of the farmers' bodies have been advising farmers. They must stick within the planting schedule. When they do not plant within the planting schedule, it throws everything off. Sometimes their investment could be lost because of the inability to access the production. It can accelerate the issue of the pests and diseases that will show up because whilst one farmer is harvesting and the crop is dry and is ready to be harvested, another farmer's crop could be at a different stage in the cycle, and it may attract bugs and so on. And it could be that the bugs just move from plots to plots and they're there all year round because the production is now spread out wider. So the point I want to make it and to advise and emphasize to farmers, stick within the recommended planting schedules that the GRDB has advised. With regards to Region 9, a small production there, 356 hectares, and that also went slightly above its target. So overall, as I mentioned earlier, we're 90% of the original targeted production, but notwithstanding, we're at 90% of the targeted production. We expect that the productivity, especially we have about 5,000 plus acres of the GRDB 15, which has a higher level of productivity than the other varieties. We expect that that will compensate for the loss in production. Coupled with, of course, we have 41,500 hectares of the GRDB 10, which prior to GRDB 15, GRDB 10 is a star variety, so to speak. It's the one that is mostly cultivated. Actually, close to 50% of the varieties that are sown is GRDB 10. And I say star variety because that variety has really been given the kind of productivity that farmers are happy with. So despite the challenges, despite the issues surrounding the production, despite the odd pest and disease issues that pop up, rice cultivation and production continues to demonstrate that it is resilient, it can address the issues, and our farmers have demonstrated that they are prepared to weather the storm and be able to supply product for our markets.
The control of red rice through careful management of water levels in your rice field for the first 40 days is critical to your yield at the end of the crop. Water acts as an agent to control red rice and even other grass weeds at a depth of 4 inches. With proper land preparation and leveling established, maintaining a light flood continuously until the canopy is fully developed will suppress red rice establishment. Leaving the land exposed for any length of time will give weeds an ample chance to germinate and infest the field. Panicle cutting should be done prior to shattering. The second cutting exercise should be conducted at 20 days to control panicle regrowth. Water management is one of 3 critical interventions for the effective control of red rice. A message from the Guyana Rice Development Board, Ministry of Agriculture.
Here's an important notice. Do you know that it is illegal to import, store, distribute, sell, and purchase antibiotics without a license or prescription, as the case may be? According to the Antibiotic Act of 1952, owners of livestock and other animals are not permitted to purchase and use antibiotics unless prescribed by a veterinarian. It should be noted that the misuse of antibiotics could result in the development of resistance to the very antibiotics, which in turn will pose health risk to the animal and to humans. The GLDA advises that farmers should not administer antibiotics to animals unless prescribed by a veterinarian. Non-compliance with this act will result in fines and imprisonment. A message from the Ghana Livestock Development Authority, Ministry of Agriculture.
The ozone unit of the Hydromet Service is advising members of the public that it is hazardous to the environment to carelessly dispose of air-conditioned units, refrigerators, and freezers without first having them drained of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, or HCFCs, the gases that causes the equipment to cool and freeze. These substances, when released into the atmosphere, contributes to the destruction of the protective ozone layer and also have global warming potential. Before dumping old or damaged CFC or HCFC equipment, consumers are advised to contact a licensed technician to safely remove the coolant from the equipment before disposal. A message from the Hydromet Service, Ministry of Agriculture.
Do you know that the smoke emitted by mosquito coils contains pesticides? Mosquito coils registered by the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board for sale contain pesticides that have been approved for use in homes in accordance with label directions. These are found in supermarkets, pharmacies, and other pesticides vending sites countrywide. The use of illegal mosquito coils is dangerous to human health, especially children and the elderly. A message from the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board, Ministry of Agriculture.
This concerted effort on the part of our rice farmers also bolstered the numbers as they related to exports as of the end of July 2018. The total monetary value of those exports, 24.1 billion Guyana dollars, up from the 20 billion recorded for the same period last year.
We have seen also with export that when we look at the period January to July 2018 as compared to January to July 2017, our export volume has been 312,593 tons, which is 15% more than the 271,740 tons for 2017. And it's approximately 120 million US dollars compared to 100 million US dollars for 2017, which is 20% more. In terms of the Guyana dollar equivalent for 2018, it's 24.6 billion Guyana dollars compared to 20.5 billion Guyana dollars for 2017. So that's in terms of the export revenue that has been earned from our sale of the various products, paddy, rice, and the byproducts to our various markets.
There has also been a shift in the direction and the concentration of those exports, with Latin America and the Caribbean comprising the bulk of those export destinations for the period under review.
Our export has been 80% more to Latin America. We have some countries like Haiti, Colombia, Panama, and Mexico that really stand out as showing increases. In fact, when we look at Panama for the January to July 2017, we did 7,886 tons compared to 53,010 tons in 2018. So we've seen some very good responses to some of our preferred or favored markets. As against other markets have remained stable. Within the Caribbean community, markets are relatively stable. Small changes on either side, but nothing significant. In Europe, our exports are lower to Europe. This is because the exports have shifted from European markets and more to Latin American markets.
Over the past few weeks, there were reports that Guyana's rice farmers were falling short in production and that one local mill was forced to import rice to Guyana to meet its international obligations. However, according to the GRDB General Manager, this is false news. No miller has been importing rice to Guyana from external sources. He assured that Guyana's farmers are producing enough to supply local consumption as well as supply enough for all export obligations.
It was reported in the press, the local press, that one miller in Region 6 would be importing rice into Guyana because of the challenges that exist in terms of production. This is not so. We will not be importing rice. The miller has made a strategic business decision in terms of their operations, and the miller having recognized in late 2017 that Guyana's first crop production would have been phenomenal, would have excelled, we would have had large production in the first crop, accelerated its marketing efforts and got additional markets. So it sourced supplies from other sources to supply to its markets, but we will not be importing any rice at all into Guyana. We have adequate supplies for local production and also to supply our existing export markets.
The Guyana Rice Development Board is reminding farmers that the effective use of insecticides for managing paddy bugs require the following steps. Mix the insecticide properly. Fill the motor blower or spray can halfway with water. If insecticide is a powder or granule, then dissolve the recommended rate in a bucket before adding it to the half-filled blower or spray can. If the insecticide is a liquid, then add the recommended rate directly into the half-filled blower or spray can. Shake the containers containing water and insecticide. Add water up to the 13-liter mark, then shake again. The sprayman is now ready to spray. Determine the swath based on the wind direction and speed. Ensure overlap of the spray mixture for best results. Be warned that in order to be effective, the spray swath needs to overlap, especially when there are more than one worker applying at the same time. If the spray swaths do not overlap, the bugs will thrive in the unsprayed areas. They will continue to feed and multiply. A message from the GRDB Ministry of Agriculture.
Climate change is now a real issue for Guyana's agricultural landscape. The Hydrometeorological Services Agromet Unit is urging all farmers to be aware of the weather factor and its impacts when planning their agricultural activities. The unit is further urging farmers to make use of the products tailored to their needs that are now available on the Hydromet website at hydromet.gov.gy. Click on the Farmers and Drought Monitoring Bulletins. These products will allow you to access various information such as seasonal outlooks and agricultural advisories. A message from the Hydromet Service, Ministry of Agriculture.
Here's an important notice. Do you know that it is illegal to import, store, distribute, sell, and purchase antibiotics without a license or prescription, as the case may be? According to the Antibiotic Act of 1952, owners of livestock and other animals are not permitted to purchase and use antibiotics unless prescribed by a veterinarian. It should be noted that the misuse of antibiotics could result in the development of resistance to the very antibiotics, which in turn will pose health risk to the animal and to humans. The GLDA advises that farmers should not administer antibiotics to animals unless prescribed by a veterinarian. Non-compliance with this act will result in fines and imprisonment. A message from the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, Ministry of Agriculture.
Do you know that the smoke emitted by mosquito coils contains pesticides? Mosquito coils registered by the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board for sale contain pesticides that have been approved for use in homes in accordance with label directions. These are found in supermarkets, pharmacies, and other pesticides vending sites countrywide. The use of illegal mosquito coils is dangerous to human health, especially children and the elderly. A message from the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board, Ministry of Agriculture.
The ozone unit of the Hydromet Service is advising members of the public that it is hazardous to the environment to carelessly dispose of air-conditioned units, refrigerators, and freezers without first having them drained of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, or HCFCs, the gases that causes the equipment to cool and freeze. These substances, when released into the atmosphere, contributes to the destruction of the protective ozone layer and also have global warming potential. Before dumping old or damaged CFC or HCFC equipment, consumers are advised to contact a licensed technician to safely remove the coolant from the equipment before disposal. A message from the Hydromet Service, Ministry of Agriculture. Well, that's all the time we have in this week's edition of This Week in Agriculture, a presentation of the Communications Unit, Ministry of Agriculture. This Week in Agriculture is produced for television by Matrix Media Productions based in East Berbice. I'm your producer and host, Christopher Holder. On behalf of the entire Communications Unit and the folks at the Ministry of Agriculture and the various agencies therein, goodbye. See you next time.